Have you ever wondered what caused poetry? Whether you have or not, Aristotle have dwelled upon this thought long back in his book Poetics. After discussing the chapter 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, now we are heading for chapter 4th of this book to understand and learn about poetry through Aristotle. And this chapter is quite worthy of learning because Aristotle have talked about many things in this chapter, and he starts the chapter by stating the fact that poetry in general seems to have sprung from two causes. So he states that poetry has sprung from two causes. There are two causes that initiates poetry. And what are that? He says the first cause of poetry is instinct of imitation, human instinct of imitation, which is in our DNA, which is in our uh, innate nature. Human have uh, this innate quality or instinct to imitate, like a child imitates their parents, like we imitate other animals, like we have drawn paintings, we have created songs, we have done a lot of art just by imitating, just by copying the nature. And so he says that imitation is implanted in man from his childhood. Man begins copying his parents, his society from his childhood. And the difference between man and other animals is that man is the most imitative animal. Man imitates the most. Man sees and man wonders what is around him, and he learns through imitation, through copying, through making uh, comical remarks, or making similarities between him and his surroundings. So an imitation is a form of learning. Like we have learned through imitations that killing is something that ends a life. We have learned this through imitation because we have seen our friends getting killed by an elephant or by a wild animal. So the man decided to live in a cave or something. So he is learning everything, the whole stage of uh, gaining the intellectual mind or gaining the survival basic instincts is through imitations. And imitation is a learning, and this learning can be full of pleasure if you are learning something which you have seen earlier and you are again viewing it. So it's like recognizing something in second time. And thus man likes to have likeness. Man wants to relate himself. Man wants to be something that can be related, that can be similar to something. And man always tries to recognize himself in nature. Man tries to copy the nature in himself. So there is always an urge of connectedness. Man wants to connect to nature. Man wants to get similar to nature. And this similarity, this search for similarity, this urge to imitate, this urge, this is the first cause of poetry, that man has an innate instinct of imitation. And if you have seen something original and then there is an imitation of that, and you suddenly out of expression recognize that thing and says that, yo, yeah, I have seen that thing. So the surprise in you, the emotions that emerged by recognizing the thing that you have already know, this is the source of pleasure in imitation. If you have seen an elephant and you see a man playing an elephant and a child is there watching the whole show, the child will exclaim that, yes, I have seen that, and that is the pleasure in this. And if you have not seen the original thing, or the thing that is being imitated, in a case, then you are enjoying the simply you are enjoying the act and the way the act was presented, the execution, the coloring, and the other things. But Aristotle is trying to explain how poetry is, he is not only talking about the poems, the verses, he is also talking about the drama, because the drama and poetry is associated from a very long time together. So, uh, drama, if you have seen something earlier related to that and you are viewing it in a drama, you will recognize it, and that recognition cause you a pleasure. But if you have not seen something that is imitating, that is being imitated, then you are simply enjoying the actions, the actions of drama. So the first cause of poetry is the instinct of imitation, the innate quality of man. And the second cause of poetry is the instinct of harmony or rhythm. You see, man always finds a rhythm in something, in bleating of a goat, or in in a waterfall, in a sound of a waterfall, in a sound of winds. Man always finds repetitive patterns. Man recognizes repetitive patterns in nature, and thus he have an instinct of harmony and rhythm. So and thus there is meter. So the meter in poetry that we have always talked about, the poetry is in this meter, or in that meter. So the meter or beat in music, that this beat, or and the scales of music, these are all due to the man's nature of harmony, the man instinct of harmony and rhythm. We are innately uh, drawn towards rhythm and repetitive patterns. So thus there is meter, which is the natural gift according to Aristotle. And by their rude improvisations, rude is not something that it usually means. Rude improvisations means deliberate improvisations, and strict or deliberate improvisations of meter caused poetry. So the first cause of poetry is instinct of imitation, and the second cause of poetry is instinct of harmony, which caused meter in the poetry. So these are the first causes of poetry. Now Aristotle talks about how poetry diverges itself in two directions, and these two directions are, yes, you are getting it, uh, comedy and tragedy. So he explains like poetry now diverges in two directions according to the individual character of the writers. So how the writer is writing it, the work of writer classified into different things, and then there's two classifications, which is a tragedy or a comedy. So he says that imitation of a noble man or a good man are generally seen in tragedy, or and there are other things like trivial characters or trivial themes, satires. So these are this comes under the genre of comedy. So the character of a nobleman or a good man imitated in drama or play comes under the art of tragedy, and the trivial shorts, the satires, comes under the art of comedy. And there are other things like hymns of to god or famous men, like praising kings or queens or gods. So these are the earlier classical things that evolved in these two forms, like tragedy and comedy. So poem of satirical kind cannot indeed be put down to any author earlier than Homer. So Aristotle is saying that Homer is the earliest of the poets who started or who worked on these things like satirical kind of poems. So there is a work of Homer, which is Margites, which is a lost epic poem of ancient Greek, um, which is we are not fortunate enough to get, like it is lost now, but this work is associated with Homer, and he is crediting Homer for his poem, epic poem Margites, which is a famous poem of Homer. So he is saying that yes, it is the lost Greek epic poem which has Homer written, and it is the earlier things that can be classified into comedy or these things. Later, he explains that the appropriate meter was also here introduced. Hence, the measure is still called the iambic or lampooning meter. So, the meter was iambic or lampooning meter. So, lampooning means mocking someone or publicly making satirical remarks about someone. So, these iambic or lampooning meters were used in Homer's poem Margites, which is the lost epic, and that can be classified into comedy. So comedy has an link with satires, and people lampooned each other, means people satired each other publicly, as the older poets were disguised themselves, the writers of heroic and lampooning verse. So the older poets were disguised as lampooning verse writers, because the uh, the heroic part was associated with tragedy, and the lampooning part was associated with comedy. So the earlier poets, the older poets, were writing either heroic poems or lampooning poems, and these two different categories emerged as the different genres of tragedy and comedy. Now he says that, as in serious style, Homer is preeminent. So again, he is giving the credit to Homer that in serious, even in serious style, rather than comedy, even in serious style, Homer is preeminent among the other poets. Homer combined dramatic form Homer combined dramatic forms with excellence of imitation, and so he too first laid down the main line of comedy. So Homer laid down the main lines of comedy as well as tragedy. His Margites bear the same relation to comedy as Iliad and Odyssey do to tragedy. So he is comparing that Homer's Margites, which is a lost epic. We are unfortunate that we don't have the access to this Margites work, this poem Margites, the work of Homer, because it is lost. It was an ancient Greek epic poem, and we are fortunate enough to have Iliad and Odyssey as in front of us, because that is what we have recovered from Greek poems. So Aristotle is saying that how we have seen that Iliad and Odyssey is a great example of tragedies, and the same way Margites bear the same relation to comedy. So Margites was a great example of comedy that Homer wrote, but we have lost it. So but when the tragedy and comedy came to light, the two classes of poets still followed their natural bent. The lampooners became the writers of comedy. So I was already explaining to you that the lampooners, those who were writing satirical things, became the writers of comedy, and the epic poets who were writing the heroic verses were succeeded by tragedians. So they became the tragedians, or because the tragedians were the one who were performing dramas. So and drama is a higher type of art, higher form of art. So because drama is a larger and higher form of art, the epic poets who were just writing and singing were replaced by the tragedians who were performing the tragedy. uh, Later, he explains or asks a question whether tragedy has yet perfected its proper types or not, whether it is to be judged in itself or in relation also to the audience. This raises another question. So, Aristotle is saying that whether tragedy is perfect or not, or whether tragedy is now perfect or not, or how it should be judged is a different question. But tragedy and comedy was the mere improvisations. Now he is saying that tragedy and comedy is mere improvisations. Improvisations of what? Improvisations of dithyramb and phallic songs. So dithyramb songs or dithyrambic poetries were the poetries that were to sing to praise the Lord Dionysus, who was the god of wine and fertility in ancient mythology. So dithyrambic poetries, which were to sing in front for god Dionysus, where it was the dithyrambic poetry was the earlier form of kind of tragedy. So dithyrambic was a serious thing because it is associated with god, and that seriousness transformed later on by various changes into tragedy. And phallic songs, which are kind of chorus songs that were sung, performed with a musical instruments and all this. So this is a kind of jolly nature. This is a kind of something light in nature, and this transformed into later forms of comedy by various differences and various things that society have transformed it through. Now he says how the drama and the characters and the plot advanced over the time. So he says that Achilles first introduced the second character. So there were always only the one character which is the chief character in the drama, and all the other things were performed by the chorus. So there were chorus and one actor, chorus and one actor. That's it. That was the only thing in drama. But Achilles introduced the second character. So now there is two character in drama and the chorus. But the importance of chorus is diminished by Achilles because now there is second character, so there must be a dialogues because one character can only perform monologue, and now there's two character, so they were talking to each other. There was dialogue, and this reduced the importance of chorus because the chorus was there to sing the story, sing the plot. But now the plot reveals itself through dialogues, so the importance of chorus kind of diminished. And Sophocles raised the number of actors to 3, and then the Sophocles came and he introduced the third character. So the importance of chorus keeps on diminishing and the characters keeps on increasing, the number of characters keeps on increasing. Sophocles also added scene painting, like the like nowadays we have props in drama to create such an environment that is to be shown according to the story. But these things which started with Sophocles started scene painting. Scene painting means he started showing the scenery of the setting. Like if the setting is a royal courtroom, so there must be a scenery of royal courtroom throughout the drama, and that is brought by Sophocles. Moreover, short plot was discarded and for a greater compass. So the short plots, like the small stories and short plots, were discarded, and people preferred long plots. So and the grotesque diction of the earlier satiric forms. So the grotesque dictions were discarded, and the styly manner of tragedy were adopted. So the language became more noble and more friendly to the society. And iambic measures, so the iambic meter became the preferred meter, replacing the trochaic tetrameter, because the iambic meter, he says, uh, was the most colloquial. So the people talked in iambic meter. It was the most common meter in which people were talking. So thus the iambic meter replaced the trochaic tetrameter, which was originally employed in satiric older forms of satirical comedy and satirical poems. And once the dialogue have come in nature, so after coming of the dialogue means after the introduction of second character, when the dialogue become a thing in drama and poetry, the iambic pentameter became a most preferred way because it is most colloquial, most easy, most common uh, for something for the people. And he is saying that people were rarely writing into hexameter and mostly writing into iambic lines because of its colloquial notations, intonations. And he says about the addition of number of plots and number of episodes and number of acts. And Aristotle says that these things should be taken as already described, so he's kind of guessing that we already know these things, and to describe these things would be a great act or would be a, a big effort, doubtless a large undertaking, so he's not going to describe all these things. But let me tell you that this is only the chapter 4 of Poetics, and now he have written a lot of the things that we haven't studied, so obviously he is going to describe these things earlier. And I hope so you will love to learn about those things also. So this is the end of chapter 4, and I'll continue making the videos for further chapters. Keep listening and keep reading and keep understanding the art of drama and poetry through Poetics and Aristotle. Thank you. Have a nice day.